All right, this is Josh Poet, First Contact Radio. I'm here with Stephen Bassett, leading advocate for ending the 64-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And most recently, you know him from the citizen hearing on disclosure. So Stephen's here to give us some updates on what went on and what the progress has been since then. So welcome back to the show, Stephen. It's awesome to have you here. How are you doing today?
Josh, doing well. Appreciate
So,
it.
Um, that was quite an event, and you obviously were quite busy and organizing all of that. So excellent job on all of that.
Thank you. Um, your listeners can check it out while they're listening by going to citizenhearing.org, which will be up for a long time to come. And there they can find. We need to update the site. It's still in the in the future tense. It needs to be converted to past tense, but they can particularly notice the media coverage that we
Okay,
have. And I think there's more than just shows there, but it gives you a sense we got quite a bit. And we are going to be seeking more, much more media coverage over the next few weeks.
excellent. So what would you say were some of the highlights that for you that over the course of the week?
The most important thing is that the fundamental concept was sound. I always knew that. I knew it 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when I came up with the idea to do something like this. But when I budgeted it out, it was like 300,000, and the prospects of getting a grant to do an event like this back then was zero. So it just languished. Had a website up for a while and made some efforts to try to find the funding, but it wasn't until 7 months ago that came up with the idea. Well, actually, it's more than that. It goes back actually longer than almost a year. We got the money 6 months ago, but the idea of like, why not build it into a documentary and fund the documentary? Because I've been working a lot out of LA and I've made a lot of contacts here. So that's what happened. And it turns out that this was the time to do this. The citizen hearing would have probably not really had much impact in 2002 or 3 or 4, but now it definitely, I think, had impact. So the idea was sound, and by that I mean persuading former members of Congress to hear testimony from witnesses on this subject, not just on UFOs, which is an acronym I despise and would hope to never have to say again if I could, but on the
Okay,
extraterrestrial phenomena as reasonably defined. In other words, these are non-human intelligences engaging us. Some people think they live on our planet and have been all along. The odds of that are extremely low. Some people think they're from out of time. I think the odds of that are extremely low. Or from another dimension, extremely low. Another planet? Yeah. There's billions of them out there. Used to be we didn't think there were. Well, of course there were. So there's other life, other planets, other systems, other stars, systems just like ours. That's just common sense. And so are they here? Yeah, we have evidence all over the place. And that evidence was presented to these members of Congress and in a setting that looked like a hearing. And we got the strongest probably setting we could get, which was the National Press Club. It cost a lot of money. Let me tell you, I could have saved over $100,000 by doing this in a fully comped ballroom at the Washington Plaza.
hmm
And it would have been nice. It would have been good, but it wouldn't have been this good. So we spent an extra $100,000 to put it into the National Press Club, which is, of course, where every president, going back to its beginning of the club, has spoken at one time or another, as well as countless other international and national figures. And of course, it's right there next to the White House and right off Pennsylvania. So the setting was right. And then we had a strong film team in there, led by Ron James of Ron James Film. Did a tremendous job in filming this and getting the webcast out. So it came across real strong on video. When people looked at it, they really felt, and this was the whole goal, that they were watching an actual congressional hearing, which just tapped right into the zeitgeist of the hearing concept, meaning, what would be like if several committees on the Hill, science and technology, space, or even Defense, Armed Services, pick one. And they started multiple hearings and started taking the testimony of the hundreds of witnesses of the pretty substantial rank and station now, not just anybody. Not that the people that are having millions of sightings around the world over the last 50 years are not important. They are, but we're talking about captains and colonels and admirals and astronauts and things like that. Politicians started taking their testimony. The same thing would happen on the Hill that happened in that room, namely the 6 former members who had 80 years of experience in the Congress. And these are good people. In other words, the Congress has had a terrible time, and its current approval rating is awful. And it's an embarrassment, literally. I mean, on a global scale, it's an embarrassment. Not that there aren't even worse legislatures out there, but for us to have what we have now is an embarrassment. And there's a lot of people on the Hill that have no business being there, but not these 6. Senator Mike Gravel, Congresswoman Carolyn Kilpatrick, Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, Congressman Mike Gravel, and Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. These are all pretty good people, and there were 3 Dems, 2 Republicans, and Mike is basically a libertarian now, so it's representative, 3 women, 3 men. If the whole Congress was like the 6 people we had at that hearing, believe me, we would be moving forward, and we wouldn't have nearly the problems we have right now in the U.S. So they're the good guys, and they conducted themselves the way hearings are supposed to be. An objective questioning of witnesses bringing information to the Congress, quote unquote, so the Congress can make good law. That is what hearings are for. They're not intended to be hyper partisan blatherfests. They're where when the cameras are on, each party basically uses their 5 minutes to blather on about whatever their beef is with the other side, while the witnesses sit there like pawns. No. These people came in with a fairly objective, open mind. Their personal position on the ET issue was unknown to me. I didn't even ask. I didn't want to know, right? Because that wasn't relevant to what we were doing. Members of Congress do oftentimes select committees they're interested in. That doesn't mean they're experts, and often they're assigned to committees. So they're on this committee. That doesn't mean they're some absolute expert in the subject matter of that committee, science, technology. They have some interest. They're trying to make good law. And so when people, they have to sit in those committees and they have to question people, and they're not coming from necessarily a strong bias. Most of the time they're not, and they shouldn't. And that was the case here. But by day 2, these people were going, wow, man, I didn't expect that. I'm amazed at the depth of this testimony. I'm amazed at what I'm hearing. By day 7, their hair was on fire, and they want to do more. They want to help. They were not obligated to that, and I'll tell you a little bit later some of the things they have done, which were quite remarkable.
Okay.
But I am convinced that if the Congress were to hold hearings, they would the members of the committees listening to these testimonies would go through the same transformation in 1 week, and at the end of that week, they'd be saying, "My God, we have an extraterrestrial presence here, and I guess it's time we started dealing with it, as a nation, as opposed to a cabal of people operating in some underground lab somewhere." And that's one of the reasons I don't have it, because there are certain people, I'm sure, in Congress that are in the know, that have sort of been told, okay, this is the situation, and this is the way we want it. I know that there was one attempt at a hearing a number of years ago, which I became privy to by a couple of congressmen, actually. And it was the kibosh was put on it by the head of the Intelligence Committee. The House Intelligence Committee basically said, that ain't going anywhere. Forget about it. And so a few people in the know can pretty much prevent hearings from happening, and they have. And so the Congress hasn't had a hearing since 1968, which was I think it was a 1 day. I think it was 1 day. Might have been 2, but I think it was like 1 day. The witnesses were legit. They gave their testimony. I have never seen this. I don't know if it's even filmed. But nevertheless, probably was pretty significant material that should have generated more hearings. But of course it didn't, because the government was in the process of getting out of the UFO quote issue because in order to, quote, take heat, to stop the heat that was continuing to come down on it, and to sort of wrap it up. And they ran through a little process which involved the 68 hearing, and then the Condon report, and the closing down of Blue Book, all which happened by the end of 69, a year later. And then their, quote, hands are clean. They're out of the business. So it's basically a whitewash. And that was 48 years ago. And do we want to count how many sightings there have been since then, how many books have been written, how many witnesses have come forward, how many photographs have been taken, video, and the Congress sits there and does nothing because it's hogtied, right, by some people who are hooked to the truth embargo and able to pretty much prevent any hearings from taking place. It's not hard to do that, trust me. So now we've done something and showed them, wait a minute, and this is a key message of this citizen hearing, namely that you are 535 individuals operating in the second branch of the most powerful nation in the world, and your approval rating recently hit 10%, which is almost it's hard to even get that. I mean, that's such disrepute. It's an embarrassment, and so you're an embarrassment, and you have to get up every day and go down and, quote, continue to do no business in this body that is now a laughingstock in a lot of other places around the world. Is that what you really want? Is that what you spent millions of dollars to get elected to do? And guess what? The biggest issue in history is waiting for you to engage it properly, not just once every 50 years. And if you do, and you start bringing in high-level military people, patriots with security clearances or formerly had security clearances, and you start getting their testimony, and that's going to go around the world, I guarantee it. Believe me, there'll be so many cameras in those rooms, you won't be able to get in. Watch how fast your approval rating goes to 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, 55%.
Mm-hmm.
This is a simple message. And I'm hoping that some people up on that hill get it. We did get some feedback from one constituent of a congressperson who currently sits in Congress, and the word I got was that the disclosure concept, the idea is kind of the buzz thing going on in the back hall. So who knows? Maybe they're talking it up right now. They were out, they were not in session during that week. Some of them were still in town, so they weren't there. They came back on Monday. But, of course, the thing was in the news. We webcast it. Any of them could have watched it on webcast. It's still up in archive, of course. $3.80, citizenhearing.org. So, and they could watch it in their privacy of their home. They have to come down and expose themselves to potential ridicule. And there's 30 hours of testimony there. And so I'm assuming some of these members of their staff are looking at this and going, wow. So, again, this is just one of the ways that the citizen hearing may be the success that we wanted. Yes, it's getting rave reviews from all over the world. Yes, the press covered it pretty well. Yes, it may be the most significant event that's ever been done in the advocacy of this issue. But it's not a success if we don't get disclosure. Right? It's like somebody that runs a marathon, gets about 200 yards from the finish line, and sits down and says, "I'm finished. I'm done." They haven't succeeded. And so, yeah, we made some strides, but until we get disclosure, no success.
One of the things that I found fascinating, specifically when I heard Congresswoman Kilpatrick speak, was that prior to this, she didn't seem to have any awareness or knowledge of the ET presence and the ET information.
The evidence, right? Okay, I mean, let's focus on the evidence for a possible presence, right? Which is still a lot, right? To be aware of that, right, means that you're on the verge of a conclusion, but you can't even get to the verge of a conclusion unless you know about the evidence, and she was not aware of it. Neither was Mike Gravel. Most of them were not aware of this evidence.
So would you say then that they represent a good cross-section of probably the awareness that Congress in general has about the evidence that is available?
Yes. It's always been the case that the Congress has all the access to the phenomena material in the public domain that we do. The the documentaries, the books, and they could at any time, on their personal time or whatever, delve into it. And plenty of people, just on the basis of what we have in the public domain, high-level people, smart people, have clearly concluded that there's an extraterrestrial presence. But let's face it, people who run for being a member of Congress is a tough job, even if you don't have to spend all your time raising money, right, to get elected. And the way it is now, that's what they have to do. They get elected and they start raising money. And this is one of the reasons that they've lost faith in themselves and they've lost faith in the process. You know, the campaign financing money thing is just one of a score of major dysfunctions in American politics, which is bringing the country down right now. It's taking it down. How far down it goes remains to be seen. And so they're caught in that. So they just don't have time. They can barely keep up with what they're doing. And so unless they've had a significant predilection to it throughout their life, going back to maybe when they were kids, they just don't know. And fine. And the government's happy to keep them as ignorant as possible. Supposedly, the people that sit on the intelligence committees of the House and the Senate would be informed about this, but it's very unlikely they're told anything about this. In fact, there's a lot of things that they probably should be told about that they're not told about. They've become, I don't know, set pieces, and are not really in a proper oversight of the vast secret empire that's been created that, you know, they couldn't get access to if they tried. So it's not a good situation in that regard. So they have to be informed. The hearing process would do it, and we just showed that, right? And I can assure you there's plenty of people, all those people within the government that don't want disclosure, do not want a congressional hearing like we just had. That it wasn't some 2-hour, you know, whitewash, but rather a week or 2 weeks of hearing scores of witnesses. They don't want that because they know the truth embargo would be over, period.
And they were very open-minded up there, and it was something to see how they changed over the course of the week and the questions that they asked, and they took this very serious. I didn't see anyone making fun of it whatsoever, and so that was really good to see that it was treated with the proper respect and in the proper light that it needed to be.
Yes, that's very true, and that was one of the principal things we thought we could accomplish with this approach. What made this, you know, approach possible was we had funding just to do it. It ended up costing $600,000, which is going to put a big strain on us because we thought we could do it for $300,000, but it had never been done before. So I guess that was wishful thinking, right? It's like trying to build a skyscraper in a manner that's never been done before, and so you're budgeting it out, going, oh yeah, this will work. So, but it lasted 5 days. 30 hours testimony day after day. So the press couldn't just decide, I won't go to that, and then it would just pass on by. Or if they went, they'd write an article and it would pass on by. This thing kept going, and so the press that didn't come on day one were hearing some stuff and going, maybe we should be there on day two, and so forth and so forth. So we were able to build press awareness, and also in the impact of the event, you know, by webcasting it, we made sure that it was going to be out there, and of course it's being pirated to death, which is not good because we have a lot of money to pay off on the production deal. We certainly are allowing fair use and 10-minute or less clips and things like that, but there were websites putting up the entire 30 hours right away, which demonstrated how badly people want this and how fired up they are, and we appreciate that. But we have over $1.5 million to pay off on this on the backing for this event and the documentary too. I don't want to overstate it. So this generated all this material that now is going to filter out. So again, this is a much more impacting event, and the idea was to create enough impact that it would break through the truth embargo, right? Crack it open, either directly or indirectly, and it probably would be indirectly. You know, the media will have, you know, all of the media can go for a couple of bucks. Though it's funny, you know, they'll still call you up, you know, some big media operation and say, can we get a free access pass to the archive? It's $3.80. I love it, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so they can go anytime. and it will be up. We're going to keep it up. We'll probably re-up it again, and people will continue to sign up and subscribe. But that means the media as well, and so they can go anytime and look at this. And I think that creates the potential that some editors and publishers, and certainly network producer types, will look. My God, this is ratings gold. This issue, and it always is, by the way. This subject matter, when documented, always does well in terms of the ratings. And of course, fictional stuff about ETs is the highest grossing genre in all of entertainment. And some of these people go, my God, this is the biggest story in history. We could be on this. We could be winning Pulitzer Prizes. And if they, and I don't think that they're under the fist of the government. I don't think the government's actually sending them threats every couple of weeks, saying, now don't forget, we'll take your beach house away and force you to clean your own bathrooms if you touch this issue. No, they don't do that. It's kind of an institutionalized embargo in a way. It just sort of runs itself now. But if some of the media go, well, wait a minute, we don't have to go along with this. This is a huge story. And so if the citizen hearing puts some of them in that mode, it will only take a couple. Nixon was brought down basically by the Washington Post and 2 reporters, along with some help from the New York Times, right? But that was it. They didn't need 55 papers coming after him. Just a couple of guys working at the Post pretty much brought him down. So it wouldn't take more than a few investigative threads coming out of the media to end the truth embargo, because there's hundreds of questions that are backed up by evidence that could be asked of people in government, and they would have no way to answer them and get out from under it. I mean, they would just be staring into the headlights, going, "Oh my God, I can't believe I was finally asked that." And that's it, So again, we're trying to create it's a chess move that was done to try to create a situation that would put the government truth embargo in mate. And then there's another component to this, which I've talked about before, is that PRG, Paradigm Research Group, was able to get the White House on paper, in writing, on the ET issue back in November 2011, where they basically denied there was any evidence of any kind for anything, including the government's withholding of information. It was a remarkable statement, which is on their White House website right now. You can go find it. And of course, it's completely untrue, and the citizen hearing clearly shows that. And so now you've got some editors and maybe some network producers that are looking at a completely false position on the executive branch of the United States on probably the most significant issue in the world. I mean, the government makes a little trip up in Benghazi, and they hold hundreds of hearings. I mean, God knows when they'll end. I know a couple of people died. It was a tragedy. But this is the biggest issue in the world. And the government, the White House, has basically put out a completely false statement. So again, the media is still in this hypnotic trance that the truth embargo created over the past 67 years. And they just need to snap out of it, right? And the citizen hearing was a message, wake up, right?
Well, good. Well, perhaps in light of all of the news that's coming out and how there is so much misinformation coming from the White House, and people are starting to see that, maybe they'll start to pay more attention to the information that they put out about the ET presence and say, you know what, if they're not being honest about this, then maybe they're not being honest about that as well, and maybe start to be more open-minded.
Well, it's interesting that virtually within a short time after the citizen hearing ended, Obama signed some directive regarding open document protocols, which was actually a good thing. Meanwhile, the Treasury Department completely gets, how would you say, in trouble because of inappropriate activities, intrusions, and intimidations, which, to be fair, the Republicans did too, probably even better when they were in power. And truth in government is right back at the forefront again. So, and of course, that's getting a huge amount of attention. So, the timing, the timing is good. The stage is set. we just have to have some sort of triggering event, something that sets the ball in motion. We have positioned this the citizen hearing positioned the snowball at the top of the mountain. All right, that's what we did with that hearing, and we're
Good.
hoping it will trigger something else that will kick the snowball over the side and get it going. And once it gets going, then that's it. Embargo is finished.
So, what do you think then that might be? I see that there's now a push to make this a UN World Conference.
We,
That kind of thing you're talking about?
yeah, that was part of what happened at the hearing. There were two things that were quite significant, I feel, and much gratitude to the committee members. One of the panels was on the Bentwaters case. The focus in this case was on, the basic events of Bentwaters, and but there were two eyewitnesses to Bentwaters that testified regarding not only the case but also the fact that they have suffered because of what happened back then and possible treatment by their superiors. And this, of course, I'm talking about John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. And they've actually they announced at the press conference they had filed a lawsuit. They announced it, that's at the citizen hearing. And a press release went out that they're suing to get their medical records. Because they want to get their medical records to deal with their issues. But interestingly enough, their medical records are not available. They're classified. Now, that's extremely interesting. Why on earth would you classify the medical records of two sergeants unless they happen to be involved in the Bentwaters event, which was almost certainly extraterrestrial? And so they got the government kind of in a mild headlock, but of course the government's holding fast and denying their records. And so they testified to that. And what happened is that all the committee members, 5 of them, signed a letter, right, to the Veterans Administration, the appropriate office, demanding those records be released. And I think one of the members, Congresswoman Hooley, said, I'll actually call them personally. That was cool, right? That's direct action.
Right.
But then perhaps the most important thing that came out of the hearing, I guess in terms of specific actions, was Congresswoman Kilpatrick, and early on was talking about the fact that this really should be globally engaged, which is totally true. The ETs aren't just here for the United States or they're here they're engaging the entire planet. Mike Gravel picked up on that, and so by Thursday, when we had the International Day, this is when we had a whole morning of testimony by witnesses from South America, 5 countries, and then we had testimony in the afternoon from 3 more countries, Canada, UK, and People's Republic of China, that they decided they wanted to maybe do something. So we held a meeting at a side room at the press club. There were all of the witnesses representing other countries, 9 other countries, as well as their family members. A lot of them had family members with them. And then we had a lot of camera crews in there and the 6 committee members. And had a meeting, talked it out, and decided that some kind of statement needed to be made. And ended up being called the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure Washington Communique, May 3, 2013. It was initially drafted by Senator Gravel. I modified it a little bit, and then Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, who has a substantial science background, made a few tweaks. And this communique was then signed and announced, I think, in a press release a few days after the hearing was over. Now, let me, in fact, read this communique, which I think will end up being an historical document.
Sure.
Could be wrong, but I have a feeling it will be. And you can see this at citizenhearing.org. Go to the foundation section, and you can read this communique. And it states as follows. From April 29, 2013 to May 3, 2013, researchers, activists, political leaders, and former members of military services and government agencies representing 10 countries gave testimony in Washington, D.C. to 6 former members of the United States Congress. After hearing this testimony, these members issue the following statement. Whereas, given the unfolding scientific understanding of the number of potentially life-supporting planets within Earth's home galaxy, it would be the height of arrogance to assert that humans are the only sentient beings within the galaxy. Whereas, given that credible witnesses have brought forth overwhelming scientific evidence documenting the current presence of unidentified and unexplained aerial craft that many believe to reflect an extraterrestrial intelligence, and whereas, given the enormous global implications, if these craft are indeed of extraterrestrial origin, such an issue is a matter for the General Assembly of the United Nations. Therefore, we, the undersigned, request the Citizen Hearing Foundation, which we have set up and are applying for, obviously nonprofit status, use its offices to organize interested parties and raise the funds necessary to pursue a global campaign to convince one or more nations to propose a resolution within the General Assembly calling for United Nations sponsorship of a world conference addressing the possible evidence for an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet. We, the undersigned, pledge our support for this effort. Congressman Carolyn Kilpatrick, Senator Mike Gravel, Congresswoman Darlene Hooley, Congressman Merrill Cook, Congressman Lynn Woolsey, and Congressman Roscoe Bartlett were unable to sign because they are in a quiet period, having just left the Congress in January this year, and unable to, under the House ethics rules, engage any foreign nations directly or indirectly. And so they are listed here. Their name is there, but there is a note saying unable to sign due to post-employment restrictions on congressional members and officers. It's, we'd love to have all 6 signatures, but I think most people will get the picture here. But this had to be done in order to comply with House ethics rules. So what's going to happen here shortly, once we get kind of tidied up, because there's a whole lot of just so much stuff to deal with in the aftermath of this event right now, that we are going to be going worldwide to see who around the world would like to see this issue before the General Assembly, and try to raise funds for the Citizen Hearing Foundation, tax deductible, nonprofit, to a nonprofit, and if we're successful, we will have the funds to drive a whole international, United Nations approach to this. Don't get me wrong. Paradigm Research Group is not going to take the heat off of the U.S. Congress or the U.S. government, and other nations too are receiving pressure. But this will just add one more component to the advocacy picture, making it clearer and clearer, I think, to those that are holding on to the truth embargo, that they need to decide. It's, that they need, which side are they on? Are they going to be on the truth side, or are they going to be on the disinformation propaganda side? Because when it comes out, that's how it's going to break down. Those that were hanging on at the end are going to be viewed very poorly by a lot of people around the world. I should also mention that almost all of the witnesses from other countries, particularly in South America, have indicated they're going to make an effort to approach their government. And by that, it's the head of state. In order to put a resolution into the General Assembly, it has to come from the country, and that it has to be authorized by the head of state by signing that task to the UN ambassador. So heads of states have got to be approached, and they will be. So this is significant. It's going to take a while for that significance to sort of manifest, Josh, but once we get over some of the aftermath of this event, because we do have some issues. We spent a lot of money. Things are a little tight. So we're going to then launch the Citizen Hearing Foundation website.
Okay.
Which won't be huge, but it'll be clean. And that from there, we will start the process of raising the money for the foundation. In addition, we're going to launch a website in due course for the documentary. And we're going to be going to the public on that to help fund that documentary to the level needed to hopefully have maybe a shot at theatrical distribution. Documentary is called Truth Embargo. So we're going to do a crowdfunding on that.
Excellent.
We hope that people will embrace that and we were thrilled at the success of Sirius, that movie that came out recently that has a lot of witness testimony in it. It was crowdfunded to the tune of $400,000 and some. And it got done with a fine director, Amardeep Kalika. And it's an hour and 50 minutes, which is very long for documentary. However, it worked. In other words, I watched it, and I didn't, because usually documentaries are too long, and after a while you're just sitting looking at your watch. But not in this case. So Sirius is getting seen around the world. It's being downloaded on a pay-per-stream, I think, and we were very impressed with the crowdfunding success of that movie, and so we will undoubtedly be doing that. It's very important that we keep the pressure on, keep the momentum going throughout this year, and not allow us to be distracted. We had some bad luck. There's always going to be things that are going to interfere with your advocacy process. We lost a lot of media coverage because of the Boston bombings that happened virtually at the worst possible time for coverage of the event. Obviously, much worse for the people that were killed and harmed up there. But that's the nature of things. Anything can happen at any time, and you can work for many, many months or even years, and a lot is lost because of the events that take place. So that hurt us, but we'll be fine because we have the archive, we have the record, and we have already quite a bit of media coverage and we can work with. And we have a full-time publicist, actually, that is expert in the ways of Washington, who is going to be working very hard to get me, as well as some of the other witnesses, but certainly myself, on the top talk shows, so that the mainstream people, I say the mainstream people, the larger public, which is still really not able to get access to this information in a mainstream setting, unless they get the bug and go hunting for it, can hear about it. And so I'm hoping we can get I can get on the Daily Show and Colbert, MSN, MSNBC talk shows, Scarborough, all of those, and discuss this issue. I'm more than ready to do that. I think I've done, Josh, now something like 1,300 interviews.
That's a lot. Probably
more than anybody else in the field, and maybe most of the people in the field combined. But that's only possible because of the internet. I got into the field just as the internet was coming on, and so the majority of these interviews are internet media, which of course prior to early 1990s, you didn't have that. So it's not like that's a big number, but it's not quite as big when you factor in we're talking about a lot of internet media. But the fact is that the internet media has one very powerful thing going for it that the media prior to the net really didn't have, and that is virtually all of the interviews you do are archived. You do some 5-minute interview on NBC News in 1975, and it's gone. It is absolutely gone. But everything on the internet is archived. And so these internet interviews actually have this residual power, and so again, I think I'm up around 1,200, 1,300. So, and the thing is, when you're doing an interview, whether it doesn't on a radio or internet radio, it's the same whether there's one person out there listening or 10 million.
Right.
And so that's how you get you master that and get ready for prime time. So when it's finally able to talk about these things on the talk shows, all the talk shows. This week and Matthews and Maddow and all of them, we're ready. I'm not the only one. There's plenty of my colleagues that are ready to take those interviews. We can handle it, no problem. And so the people can start hearing about this subject in the venues where supposedly the most important issues that concern them are being addressed, but not this one. But we're ready to change that, starting right away.
Well, good. It's very important, and sometimes you do need to really be able to polish up what is being said, so that when you get to the larger venues, things are, you got all your ducks in a row, so to speak.
Yeah, all of these years of the conferences, presentations, creating websites, it's really all prelude to the big show. Mm-hmm. Practice, I like to call it.
Right.
When the mainstream media finally realize that they've been sitting out on the most profound news, the most profound event, the most profound issue in history, there's a whole lot of people now in this field, more than ready, In fact, they will handle themselves better than a significant number of the people now that turn up on these shows,
Right.
pushing issues or addressing stuff. We've got a lot of sharp people in this field, so we will, I think, hold up pretty well when the mainstream spotlight finally really turns on.
Excellent. All right. So, is there anything else particular that that you need to say about what went on there, Stephen, and where things are going, or we covered it pretty well?
Yeah, I think we got a sense of it. Obviously, citizenhearing.org is an awful lot there. You can read it. We're going to update it to the past tense here shortly. And there's a huge amount of footage that is spreading around on YouTube. We're having to pull back or having to pull out the postings that are not fair use, but tons of have fun. Tons of 10-minute, 5-minute clips from these 30 hours. You can get a full sense of it, and of course the archive is still up at citizenhearing.org. You can watch the whole 30 hours. So we want people to do that. We want people to think about this Citizen Hearing Foundation, and think about whether they would like to help support the truth process in that way, particularly with the UN General Assembly approach with tax-deductible contributions. Spread the word on about all of this, particularly the links to the site throughout the social media, which we've been using extensively. We've got a pretty good social media presence now. These are things which could be very helpful. And then in other ways, just stay on this, because I think we have a window of opportunity here that this truth embargo could end this year, even this summer possibly. The pot's pretty much close to boiling, so let's keep the heat on and see if we can get this done, and then we'll decide how we're going to do things, conduct our affairs, what kind of societies we have in a post-disclosure world, when everybody on the planet is aware that, guess what? There's other civilizations out there. How about that? All right? And look forward to learning about them and seeing where that takes us. Ultimately, it takes us to the stars.
Right.
And maybe damn soon, because I think we have a lot of technology that and that's the one thing I didn't mention, Josh. Behind all of this is maybe, from the standpoint of the average person out there in this world, the tech issue. There is suppressed technology with ET derivations, which could very well change the paradigm in a host of issues affecting the human condition, and get us out of the mess we put ourselves in, and help moving towards a world where we have sufficient resources so that we don't have 20, 30,000 kids dying every day, and we don't have political tensions and potential wars over water and food. These techs are there. There's too much evidence, and whatever has been accomplished by the government with those technologies, and I think it's a lot. If there are limitations, certainly allowing these technologies to be engaged by the full intellectual power of the human race is going to enhance the potential of getting them fully into play. And the number one issue is energy. Is the energy modality that drives these craft replicatable by humans? And if it is as effective and good as we think it is, it could move us out of the age of fossil fuels, drop the cost of energy by 80, 90, 95%, freeing up trillions of dollars for other purposes. And that would be transformative. And it
Absolutely.
could just be right under our nose, meaning in the underground laboratories of the military intelligence community being developed for weapons, certainly, if not at minimum that, under our nose, literally. And so it's time to open up the vaults. It's time to have real, open, transparent government. It's time to stop the lies and the propaganda. If we do that, things will get better very, very fast. All right? There's no question about it. But something's got to start the ball rolling. I think disclosure is it. I think the drive for disclosure is it. I think the drive for disclosure is ultimately going to highlight most of the dysfunction in American politics today, and institutional, what we'll call dysfunction. And as a result, it will be sort of a macroscopic catalyst
Hmm.
That's the kind of thinking, that's the kind of implications that are driving, the activists like myself. I mean, that's when you have that kind of stuff at stake. It's easy to stay committed to something.
Right. And once we get there, we'll probably wonder what took us so long.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, you can count on that. That's true of every activist movement that has ever taken place. Once you got it, you're thinking, why in the hell did it take this long to do what was so obviously the right thing to do? But
Right.
that's human nature, Josh. Human nature is
Yeah.
still pretty much the same as it was a long time, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago,
It
and
sure
it
is.
will remain that way for a long time to come. But that's okay. That's our part of our quirky, you know, qualities that make us so special.
Right.
But I think there's some new qualities we could add on here pretty soon in a new paradigm, and a new paradigm is certainly coming. And I really
Excellent.
appreciate the time.
Absolutely. And it's always great to have you on the show. So I thank you for being here again and look forward to finding out new information in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We need to update the site. It's still in the in the future tense. It needs to be converted to past tense, but they can particularly notice the media coverage that we
Okay.
have, and I think there's more than just shows there, but it gives you a sense we got quite a bit, and we are going to be seeking more, much more media coverage over the next few weeks.
Excellent. So what would you say were some of the highlights that for you that over the course of the week?
The most important thing is that the fundamental concept was sound. I always knew that. I knew it 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when I came up with the idea to do something like this. But when I budgeted it out, it was like 300,000, and the prospects of getting a grant to do from witnesses on this subject, not just on UFOs, which is an acronym I despise and would hope to never have to say again if I could, but on the
Okay.
extraterrestrial phenomena as reasonably defined. In other words, these are non-human intelligences engaging us. Some people think they live on our planet and have been all along. The odds of that are extremely low. Some people think they're from out of time. I think the odds of that are extremely low. Or from another dimension, extremely low. Another planet? Yeah. There's billions of them out there. Used to be we didn't think there were. Well, of course there were. So there's other life, other planets, other systems, other stars, systems just like ours. That's just common sense. And so are they here? Yeah, we have evidence all over the place. And that evidence was presented to these members of Congress and in a setting that looked like a hearing. And we got the strongest probably setting we could get. An event like this back then was zero. So it just languished, had a website up for a while, and made some efforts to try to find the funding. But it wasn't until 6 months ago, 7 months ago, that came up with the idea. Well, actually, it's more than that. It goes back actually longer than that, almost a year. We got the money 6 months ago, but the idea of like, why not build it into a documentary and fund the documentary? Because I've been working a lot out of LA and I've made a lot of contacts here. So that's what happened. And it turns out that this was the time to do this. The citizen hearing would have probably not really had much impact in 2002 or 3 or 4, but now it definitely, I think, had impact. So the idea was sound, and by that I mean persuading former members of Congress to hear testimony.
All right, this is Josh Poet, First Contact Radio. I'm here with Stephen Bassett, leading advocate for ending the 64-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. And most recently, you know him from the citizen hearing on disclosure. So Stephen's here to give us some updates on what went on and what the progress has been since then. So welcome back to the show, Stephen. It's awesome to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Josh. Doing well. Appreciate it.
So
Yeah.
that was quite an event, and you obviously were quite busy and organizing all of that. So excellent job on all of that.
Thank you. Your listeners can check it out while they're listening by going to citizenhearing.org, which will be up for a long time to come. And there they can find, which was the National Press Club. It cost a lot of money. Let me tell you, I could have saved over $100,000 by doing this in a a fully comped ballroom at the Washington Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have been nice. It would have been good, but it wouldn't have been this good. So we spent an extra $100,000 to put it into the National Press Club, which is, of course, where every president, in going back to its beginning of the club, has spoken at one time or another, as well as countless other international and national figures. And of course, it's right there next to the White House and right off Pennsylvania. So the setting was right. And then we had a strong film team in there, led by Ron James and Ron James Film. Did a tremendous job in filming this and getting the webcast out. So it came across real strong on video. When people looked